In this video, you'll learn about the differences between arm and wrist vibrato, if you need to know how to do both, and when to use either. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Megan. I'm a violinist and teacher. I have my bachelor's and master's degrees in violin performance, and I am currently Suzuki trained through Book 7. If you're enjoying my videos, the biggest thing that you can do to support me is just make sure you're subscribed to my channel. And if you're interested in working with me more closely, you can check out the description for all the different ways to do so. What is the difference between arm and wrist vibrato? Well, the main difference is just how you do it. At the end of the day, they're both vibrato, but for wrist vibrato, you are going to primarily use your wrist, and for arm vibrato, you are going to primarily use your arm. This is the basic movement of wrist vibrato. As you can see, my wrist is acting as a hinge for the rest of my hand to move backwards. One pretty common mistake I see with wrist vibrato is people moving their wrists back and forth, which I totally get it. You think, okay, the vibrato comes from the wrist, I should move my wrist back and forth, but that's actually not the case. The wrist acts as the hinge for the hand to move backwards. So wrist vibrato might look something like this. So again, as you can tell, my wrist is staying still. It's not moving back and forth like this, but it is acting as the hinge for the rest of my fingers or my hand to move backwards. If you know this is something that you are guilty of, moving your wrist back and forth, try practicing your wrist vibrato up in 4th or 5th position with your wrist against the instrument. This will prevent the wrist from moving so you can learn the appropriate movement. This is the basic movement of arm vibrato. Arm vibrato and shifting actually are the same basic movement, just opening and closing your elbow. What I want you to notice here is that, yes, my wrist is moving a little bit. I am not actively moving it. I'm just being very relaxed, very soft, and it's moving by itself. So arm vibrato might look something like this. Well, yes, the movements of shifting and arm vibrato are the same. The scale is different. Obviously, when you are shifting, you are going to move your elbow much more. And when you're doing vibrato, you're going to move your elbow much less. So, do you need to know how to do both arm and wrist vibrato? Well, like many things with the violin, the answer is yes and no. I believe that one or the other comes more naturally to everyone. For example, when I was first starting to learn vibrato, my teacher was trying to teach me wrist vibrato, and I was struggling. I was just not getting it. But then I switched over to arm vibrato and I got it much quicker. So for me, arm vibrato comes a lot more easily. I think arm vibrato is easier just because it's a bigger movement. It's a bigger muscle. You're moving your elbow rather than just your wrist. But hey, that's just me. I have plenty of students that wrist vibrato came more naturally to, and that's totally fine. If you're someone who is just starting on your vibrato journey, I recommend trying both types, but only sticking to one. I think that trying to learn both at the same time is just going to lead to confusion and perhaps bad habits later down the road. Similarly, if you are someone who is struggling with your vibrato and you've never tried the other type, I highly recommend giving it a try because it might come easier to you. You never know. If you have tried both types and you feel just like none of them really seem to work, pick the one that is slightly more easy to you and focus on developing that one first. Like I said, at the end of the day, they're both just vibrato. So if you're a beginner or intermediate player or someone who's just struggling with vibrato, please do not worry about trying to do arm versus wrist. Just do whatever comes easiest to you and develop that first. Now, if you are a professional or very advanced player, yes, there are some advantages to knowing both wrist and arm vibrato. Because wrist vibrato is a smaller movement, it makes vibrating quickly more easily because you're moving less. However, wrist vibrato is also more narrow than arm vibrato. Again, because the arm, the elbow is a bigger muscle, it can move more. So if you want a really fast vibrato, you can use wrist vibrato. If you want a really wide and juicy vibrato, you can use arm vibrato. So in addition to that, when you are playing very high up on the instrument, it is easier to do arm vibrato. If I'm playing up here and I'm trying to do wrist vibrato, you can see that I have very limited movement. Again, just because one, the wrist can move less, but also two, my wrist and my hand shape up against the instrument is much different than it is down here. So if I were to use arm vibrato, again, I get that bigger range of motion. As you can see, while I'm doing this, my violin is also moving a little bit. That is totally normal, especially when playing up in the high registers. What's causing this is that while I'm doing the vibrato, you can see that my hand is pressing up against the instrument and causing that little bit of movement. So when should you use either wrist or arm vibrato? Well, there's really no guidebook, there's no one size fits all. As I mentioned, it is generally easier to do faster vibrato with wrist vibrato. So if there's a particular note or passage where you want super, super fast vibrato, try wrist vibrato. It will be a little bit more narrow though. This is great for impressionistic pieces, like pieces like Ravel and Debussy. And similarly, that word is hard to say sometimes. Arm vibrato is going to give you a bigger and more juicy vibrato. It will also be wider. So this is more appropriate for like romantic music, things like Brahms and Tchaikovsky. Now, this is not to say you can only use arm vibrato in romantic music or vice versa. It's just a general guideline. So now you know the differences between arm and wrist vibrato. If you need to know how to do both of them and when you should use either. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and please make sure you subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.